Pozivam Frančesku Albaneze, specijalnu izvestiteljku Ujedinjenih nacija za Palestinu. Očigledno nema potrebe da je predstavljam, a razgovor će voditi moj prijatelj Filip Balunović. Ima mnogo uloga, između ostalog piše knjige, među njima i Beda ljudskih prava, jedna od njih. On je naučni saradnik na Institutu za filozofiju i društvenu teoriju, kao i docent na Fakultetu za medije i komunikaciju. Izvolite.
Thank you. Welcome and good evening. I should probably start with saying thanks to the organizers, to Olof Palme Center, to Solidar, but also to Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung and Reconstruction Female Fund, or Women's Fund. This evening we have a pleasure of talking to a special rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, Frančeska Albaneze, who is being under constant pressure, but also who has not given up and will not give up from speaking truth about what is happening in Gaza at this moment, what has been happening ever since the genocide started in Gaza. One of the main things or the main issues behind the possibility of conducting genocide in Gaza, but also in many different parts of the world throughout history, and I would start from that question, is the point of dehumanizing those against which the genocide is conducted. And the history of dehumanization of Palestinian people and the narrative behind it did not start in 2023. It started way before with statements of some of the Israeli prime ministers from 1969, for instance, Prime Minister Meir, who said that there is no such thing as Palestinians, which is a narrative that until nowadays is present in part of not only Israeli public but also global public. So I would start by asking you about the roots of this dehumanization of Palestinian people, something you have been extensively writing about in your reports, but also saying in your public statements.
Thank you very much, Philippe, and thank you all for being here and for welcoming me with such a warmth. It's a pleasure to be in Serbia and tonight in Belgrade with you. Dehumanization is one of the root causes of crimes toward others, especially when the other is a collective. And I can't recall a moment in history for the past 100 years during which Palestinians were not dehumanized. Of course they have been dehumanized. They have been dehumanized by the British who arrived to their land breaking promises. They have made conflicting promises, but promising to help the Palestinians, the people of Palestine, to achieve independence had they helped defeat the Ottomans, which is what happened. And then they were betrayed because eventually the Palestinians became the in the United Nations precursors, the League of Nations. In 1922, they became the non-Jews of Palestine when the League of Nations decided that the British could help create a national homeland for the Jews in Palestine. And of course, there is no question that Jewish people were enduring the most horrific crimes, and they had done so for centuries in this continent. But the Palestinians didn't have anything to do with that. Rather the contrary, the Ottoman Empire and Palestine, as part of it, had been welcoming people kicked out of Europe for centuries, including Jewish people. And but the problem is that colonial countries back then supported the creation of the State of Israel, and not because it was a way to pay back the Jews, because it took decades to recognize the harm done to the Jewish people of Europe. So the Palestinians have been dehumanized, meaning they've been made invisible. And they have been invisibilized through this narrative. Palestinians do not exist, Golda Meir said. So what was the word that was printed on her passport? The first passport that she had when she arrived in Palestine from Eastern Europe. She got a passport that had the word Palestine on top of it. She was a citizen of British Mandate Palestine, like all the Palestinians who were kicked out by Israel at its creation between 1947 and 1949. And they have been dehumanized because the international community stopped seeing them as a people belonging to a land, as any indigenous people in Canada, in Australia, in the United States, and other places in the world have also endured. There have been refugees, there have been people in the occupied territories. Today, we call the people in Gaza Ghazawi. They're not even Ghazawi. 75% come from modern-day Israel. So you see, the dehumanization, the first layer of dehumanization is not recognizing who these people are. Palestinians, as Edward Said used to say, orphans of a homeland that existed and is no more. But still they exist as a people. They have reconstituted themselves as a people. And in the past decades, Israel has made them, especially during the occupation, which started in 1967, they've been treated as the enemy, not as the protected people under occupation. There are rules even when you conduct wars. There are rules even when there is a military occupation. And Palestinians have been treated as an encumbrance that had to be uprooted. They become killable, displaceable, torturable. I mean, if you look at the staggering numbers of those who have been arrested and detained over 55 years until 2023, I investigated this, nearly 1 million Palestinians had been detained, at least once. And how many have been killed, and how many have been tortured, and how many have been left really without the possibility of envisaging a future for themselves and the others. And this is the thing. So dehumanization is the constant factor of an oppressive regime. Apartheid is premised upon the dehumanization of the other. Genocide is made permissible by the dehumanization of the others. Years ago, I read a testimony of a soldier who asked why he would the Israeli soldiers would kill and beat and arrest children. He asked, which children? Because they don't see children. They are young adults at best who are like terrorists in the making, unquote. So you see the dehumanization run deep. And then, of course, what happened on October 7 ignited a rage and the fear in the Israeli society that they've not gone out of still. It's not 900 days from October 7, it's 900 days of October 7. This is the mindset. And so Palestinians they've been called Amalek, they've been called monsters, a nation responsible, there has been genocidal logic, but as I was saying, it comes from afar. And it's a huge responsibility for the international community not to have prevented and stopped what Israel has done in the last 900 days.
You mentioned the international community, which fits well to my next question. Ever since the Balfour Declaration, 1917, and later, after the Six-Day War, also we had the UN Resolution 242, in which, and this is agreement among many historians, both Israeli, Palestinians, and all the others who deal with the issue, from Ilan Pape to Rashid Khalidi, etc., they all write about the absence of Palestine or Palestinians from any possible arrangements, especially after the Six-Day War in 1967. whenever the Palestine was at the table among the great powers or at the table of the international community, it is always, as Ilan Pape writes, the negotiations were happening above Palestinians' heads. So they were rarely involved in these negotiations and talks about their destiny. What's the responsibility? I would say what's the role, but I would rather say what's the responsibility of international community, international institutions, and especially great powers in the destiny of Palestinian people.
Yeah, of course, but the dehumanization of the other is not the prerogative of Israel. I mean, there is an interesting, very interesting and instructive book by Rashid Khalidi, Iron Cage, that explains how the colonial project, without even mentioning as a colonialism in that part, but he explains how the land between the early 900 and 900 and until after 1948, the land has been taken from the Palestinians. And it's not that the Jewish migration from Europe, surely there were persecutions from Russia, Ukraine, and then in Europe, in Nazi Germany, and in fascist Italy, and in Vichy's France, and pretty much everywhere in Europe. The Jews were aggressed, attacked, discriminated against, and threatened. So no question. However, they didn't move to Palestine seeking refuge. They went as part of a colonial project, and this is a reality. And this colonial project would have not been possible without the support of the colonial countries. Back then, in 1948, between 51 and 54 states were part of the what we call the international community. 2/3 of the world were still under, actually more, 3/4 of the world were still under colonial yoke. They had not got independence. Some would still have to undergo brutal, cruel wars to break the colonial ties, you know. And that mentality, that colonial mentality, was premised upon an idea of superiority. Colonial European countries and were superior, were the civilizers toward the others. And so, of course, I mean, if you read the papers, the documents, official documents, and if you dig into the archive, including the UN archives of those years, you or journalists, for example, in the 30s, they would talk of Palestinians as like a hordes of savages and desert people. But Palestine was had a very sophisticated society, fruit and agricultural related businesses and industry. They were exporting they were exporting oranges. I was thinking of your country. They were exporting. Sorry for distracting you. They were exporting oranges, and they had universities. Look at the pictures of the women in Palestine in the early 30s. I mean, when I compare them with Italians of those years, it's mind-blowing how backward we looked. So I say, it was not this backward place, Palestine, and of last century, the first half of last century. It was destroyed. It was destroyed. They destroyed an entire civilization. They fragmented it as a child would do with a cookie. And these people, look at the Palestinians, although 2/3 of them were kicked out at gunpoint. I mean, Palestine was ethnically cleansed from the bottom to the end. And there are plans that continue to be discovered and documented, but who cares? So there was an ethnic cleansing, and 500 villages were erased, were destroyed. There were 53 or 56 massacres during which women, children, the elderly were exterminated. The Tantura massacres. I mean, there is even the documentary Tantura, where you have former Israeli soldiers laughing about the girls that they had raped for days. It's not me. Listen to them. And the dehumanization of the Palestinian continues in this international community that even if us, ordinary people, finally understand Israel as a settler colonial project, they finally understand Israel as an apartheid state, because a state that rules through military rule over an ethnic group while it maintains civil law for its own privileged citizens, it's an apartheid state. And so now we understand. And still, it's not enough. Israel has killed 75,000 people through bombs and other forms of ammunition, and we still don't stop it. Actually, there are people there are governments that say, we sell weapons, we buy weapons, and we will continue. And you will have to face justice. This is what I say, because this is the response that we have to give to this unsufferable hubris and discrimination that is really based on dehumanizing the other. So again, we can talk about for hours about that, but I think that this is enough to kick off discussions.
And how come that after the Second World War we had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which in a way essentialized human rights, saying that or arguing that human beings are value in itself, regardless of who they are, regardless of their skin color, whether they have state or they don't have state, etc., as an answer to the atrocities of the Second World War, Holocaust being the biggest atrocity of the Second World War. How come that all the things, and you mentioned colonialism, colonial project, you mentioned settler colonialism, which is specifically applicable to the contemporary situation in Gaza and the West Bank, but also to the history of Palestine from the Second World War onwards. What was the response by the international institutions having such document at hand, that human beings are essentially, there is an essential value in them, even regardless of the fact that most of the great powers didn't talk about Palestine as a state?
Palestine has been central to the life of the United Nations since the very beginning. The question of Palestine is one of the first issues that the United Nations had to deal with as an international question. So it's not that it was not relevant. The way they've actually, in the first documents that you find in the UN archives, they talk about the future of Palestine. And after the creation of the State of Israel between 1947 and 1949, it becomes the question of Palestine. So the question is problematized. It's not about the future of Palestine. The future has already been decided. And it's Israel and what remains of Palestine. Because you remember, Israel was created inside Palestine. When Zionism, like this ideology that envisages that Israel is a state, Israel in the biblical land of Palestine is the Jewish people have the only self-determination rights in that land. And when Zionism arrived to the land, Palestine was inhabited by 10% of the population who was Jews, 70% Muslim, 20% Christian. And while it has changed over time, it has, sorry, I forgot the question. I'm sorry, it's been intense. Forgot the question.
Essential.
No, essentialization, sorry, mamma mia, embarrassment. No, so I was saying, they knew what Palestine was. They knew what the Palestinians had suffered. In 1948, the Swedish Red Cross, the head of the Swedish Red Cross, Folke Bernadotte, was appointed as mediator on the question of Palestine because the United Nations had accepted the British proposal to divide Palestine into two. So despite the fact that the Jewish people had control over 6% of the land, the United Nations divided into two, proposed to partition it into two, 55% for the Jewish state, 45% to the Arab states. They exported the model that they had tested in this part of the world into the Middle East, dividing people according to ethnic lines. That has always been a disaster, you know that. But I'm the best place to talk about that. But and it has not worked. It has not worked in India and Pakistan. It has not worked in Palestine, and the British have never apologized about that. But still, the international community has endorsed it and has maintained it. And how it's possible that they told themselves they recognized human rights while the question of Palestine was in the making, while 3/4 of the international population was under colonial yoke, because that was a promise. But we should, as I was saying this morning, we should stop telling ourselves the comforting story that all of a sudden, after the Second World War, we decided to be good and we entered international treaties and all of a sudden we embraced freedom. It's not true. It took 20 years, including to a country, to many countries in Europe. I won't mention anyone because people are sensitive in this part of the world, but I'm not talking about Serbia for once. I was talking about Germany. No, but it took years to recognize what had been done to the Jewish people. Read Primo Levi. When Primo Levi, Holocaust survivor from Italy, wrote, "If this is a man," he spoke perfect German and he wanted to check the German version. And the Germans didn't want to publish it. They said, "It's not true, it's an exaggeration, it's relativizing the danger we were facing." You see, so it's not that they all of a sudden embraced the Jewish people. And it's not like the Jewish people were all of a sudden, after the concentration camps the gates of the concentration camps were open, it's not that all of a sudden people were welcoming the Jewish people. No, the British, the United States, and Great Britain were turning back boats full of Jewish refugees from Europe. This is why it's clearly they had no other place where to go. This is the thing. But so we have passed the Universal Declaration for Human Rights because there were good people. There have always been good people in the system. And this was the promise. There was a moment of weakness. There were millions of people who had been killed. And so we said, okay. Probably we have been too brutal toward each other. So let's agree about this. But then the politics do not change as much as the good intentions of good people. And this is why I want to say, it seems to us that this is the darkest moment in history. It seems to us that we are going back. Not really. Yesterday, I was in a podcast where the interviewer told me there is someone who says that the border is no longer a border when you get there, when you get too close to that. Yes, we have reached the limit of the freedom that the system has allowed to us. So either we stick to it and we get smashed against the wall, or we broaden the frontier of the space of freedoms and rights. What I'm trying to say is that we have done better. Until 50 years ago, there were countries that were practicing torture on a regular basis, were punishing inmates by burning their bodies with boiling oil. There were people of color kept in zoos until 50 years ago in Europe. And there was segregation and racial segregation, and there was apartheid. I'm not saying that all of this has disappeared. But today, clearly, we have a human rights conscience. So having human rights in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights has inspired human rights treaties. Treaties have been ratified also because of the push of people like us, those who have been fighting for the recognition of equal rights for women, those who are still fighting for recognition of equal rights of women and the queer community and indigenous people. The decolonization wouldn't have happened without people rebelling, revolting, and unfortunately, to remove colonial oppressive regimes, sometimes you need the use of force. Sometimes it's been violent. I'm not saying you should be violent. I'm saying this is what history tells us, that the oppressor doesn't live on its own will. You see what I mean? Look at Algeria. It's been brutal, the war of independence of Algeria. Brutal. But why the French didn't get out of Algeria and let them enjoy the independence without, still today, they cannot cope with the fact that they've committed massacres in Algeria. So this is why I'm saying today my hope against this darkness is that people are getting together, they understand that the genocide is not acceptable, that we have responsibilities toward it. It's not normal that countries continue to send weapons to the country to the state which is accused of committing genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This is why I don't think that eventually human rights have been essentialized. Human rights have been given, I put there as a promise and as a container that now it's up to us to feel and refill up to the point we will be all equal, satisfied and free. This is what I think it is about.
If we talk about all if we talk about the history and the events from history from this part of the world, but also more generally about human rights and the great powers' role, also there is this period between 2008 and 2022 that you mentioned in your last piece for Le Monde Diplomatique, where you replied to the critiques that you received recently, especially by the French Minister of Foreign Affairs and some others. And then for the first time, I see these numbers from 2008 to 2022. There was 6,000 people killed, 6,000 Palestinians killed, also 1,200 children killed. And in that piece, you also mention a concept that drew my attention, which is the concept of unchilding. Taking away the childhood from the kids in Palestine. Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, look, if I look at the question, first of all, I wrote that article on Le Monde Diplomatique because I really wanted to put things in context. But I think that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France have been received the right response already by its own people and its own media, so I was fine with it. But just, I thought that it was important to put in context the aggression against human rights people, human rights advocates, human rights defenders, human rights experts, which provokes the fury of those in power more than the fact that some of their homologues are inciting to commit brutal crimes for 900 days and with impunity. I mean, I've not seen any reaction of the kind that the French Minister of Foreign Affairs had toward me for something I hadn't said, by the way, against any Israeli leaders who has incited to genocide and ethnic cleansing. So, look, I think that what it boils down to is that colonialism is torture, is, as I argue in my last report, which was published yesterday, constitutes a torturous environment for those who live under colonial yoke, meaning people are naturally not free to determine themselves, violation of the right of self-determination. Because what is the right of self-determination? It's the right to exist as a people, as simple as that. which means either you have your own state or you are protected as a minority. Palestinians cannot do that because they are kicked out of the land, and kicking them out of the land means violence, forced displacement, home demolition, and if they resist or if they do not resist, they are likely either shot or arrested. And when they are arrested, it's difficult that they return to life healthy, as a healthy people. The Israeli jailing system has always been brutal, and I've documented it early on in my report. And if you look at what it means, life under Israeli occupation, as life under Israeli apartheid, forced through military rule, through the eyes of a child, you see nothing but despair. And this is why I use this term that is not my invention. It's used by a Palestinian scholar, Nadra Shahub-Kevorkian. She says Palestinians, Israel, with its domination over the Palestinians, unchilds them, deprives them of childhood, because a child is forced to live without the tenderness, without the lightness, without the silliness of being a child, but really the lightness, because they are forced to carry heavy weights that are far too big for their little shoulders. The fact of the constant fear of going to school and not find your home when you go back, it's real. The fact that you can be arrested on the way to school or from school, or if you encounter a settler, or a terror squad, as the settlers in the occupied Palestinian territory should rather be called. It's very easy to lose a parent, killed or taken by the illegal occupation army, because the occupation is unlawful. Even the International Court of Justice has said that. So it's very difficult to be a child and to grow peaceful and loving. And I don't know how the Palestinians do, because seriously, despite all what they have endured, they remained peaceful and lovely. And yes, they have part of that population has resorted to violence. Regrettable as it is, I continue to say that we cannot tell the story of Palestine as the story of the last 900 days, or the story of one day out of 100 years, if you see what I mean. And the Palestinians, now the Unchilding has become one of the extreme. If you think that there are over 20,000 children, there were 20,000 children 5 months ago, 20,000 children 5 months ago who had been killed by trauma, so by bombs or by sniper fire. And then there are the same number of children who have been left orphans in Gaza alone. We are talking of Gaza alone. And then there is the same amount of children who has lost a limb, at least one limb. I've seen kids with one elbow only left. No legs, no arms. There are 700. There are really babies who have remained limbless without having even crawled one day of their life. And how do you call it? Call it Unchilding is even extreme, but genocide is a crime intended against the people from the very roots. And this is why I say we have been really fool not to recognize what Israel was preparing for the Palestinians, because it's exactly from the treatment of children, 700 of them arrested every year for 15 years. And we in the United Nations were writing, but everyone, including human rights organizations, were writing reports recommending Israel to be gentle with Palestinian children in their military jails. And this is the problem. We normalize the violence to a point that it becomes itself dehumanizing in this case, of the Palestinians.
What are other indicators? Thank you very much. I was about to ask. we are talking about genocide, and we're talking about different dimensions of genocide. Probably the most difficult one, or the most sensitive one, being related to the cases you just described with Palestinian children. And you've been struggling as an international lawyer to push international public into direction of accepting that that the indicators for genocide in Palestine are present. There are cases before the international courts. Can you talk a little bit about, in general, the indicators that show us clearly that there is what you call in international law the genocidal intent?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily talk of indicators, but the Genocide Convention, Article 2 and Article 3 list the crimes of genocide. But the acts of genocide, what constitutes genocide, is Article 2, which says the intention to destroy a group, national, racial, ethnic, or religious group as such, and then we'll come back to it, in total or in part, through one of these acts that I'm going to tell you, constitutes genocide. So these acts are acts of killing, acts of infliction of severe bodily or mental harm to members of the group as such. The creation of conditions of life calculated to destroy. What does it mean? If I leave you without water, without food, without electricity, without medications, why also carpet bombing you and also telling you, go there and bombing you there, come back and bombing you here. Chances are that I am creating conditions calculated to destroy when I destroy all the means of livelihood, when I leave 2 million people without a roof on their head, when I destroy the health system, not only by raiding, by pulverizing the hospitals, but also targeting medical personnel, killing over 1,000 health workers, doctors, nurses, specialists. I mean, you remove the possibility of people from being cured, and also you remove the capacity of the system to rebuild itself once the war within which the genocide is taking place is over. And then there is the inflicting suffering, as I said, but also the prevention of birth, which is one act that I've not investigated by the Commission of Inquiry on in Israel and Palestine has, and the subtraction of children. So these acts are crimes in and of themselves, but also constitute genocide when there is the intent through these crimes to destroy a people as such. And indeed, this is why lawyers speak of double intent. So you kill the people intentionally, you deprive intentionally the people of food, water, medications, which are crimes under international law, are war crimes, but also, or you torture people, torture thousands, imprison dozens of thousands, without charge, without trial. These are all crimes in and of themselves. But if behind it there is the intention to destroy the group as such, then you are also committing genocide. So this is the genocidal intent. The genocidal intent, you cannot distinguish it from the identity or the words or of the perpetrators. You recognize it from the identity of the victims. They have one only thing in common, belonging to the group targeted for destruction. Then they can be women, men, old or young, or even babies. They can be nurses, doctors, journalists, unemployed. They can be praying, or they can be sleeping, or they can be fighting. They're all treated like the same, an encumbrance to be killed, or to be destroyed. This is the other thing. People tend to confuse. So far, even the jurisprudence has been very focused on genocide as killing, as mass killing. but even in the genocide, even during the Holocaust, and frankly, even in this genocide in this part of the world, that are crimes that were not recognized as such because we didn't even have the sensitivity, probably, as a society to recognize. But raping thousands of women, like as part of a war, is it okay? Of course not. And it's part of the destruction of a people as such. I mean, this is not just my interpretation. And the thing is that Israel is really showing the colonial pedagogy of genocide. Genocide as part of a colonial erasure, because it's saying that they have to leave, they have to go. Voluntary migration, ship them to Malaysia, to Africa, who cares? Someone will take them, go to Egypt, we'll give everything you need there. As long as you are not here, because we need the land. The land is ours because God has given it to us. The motivation of the genocidaire do not count. What counts is the fact that they are targeted as such. And genocide is a process. It's not a crime that is committed in 1 second or 1 month. It takes planning, it takes dehumanization, it takes execution. Indeed, this is why genocide scholars, especially after the Rwanda genocide, said that in order to have genocide, you need to have the intention, but also you look at the reality on the ground and the capacity. Israel had the capacity to commit genocide. This is why the moment the International Court of Justice in January 2024, also recalling the jurisprudence of Bosnia versus Serbia, in which it said the moment a state has this, there is a signal, there is a sense that act of genocide might be committed. This is when influential, especially in states with influence, need to intervene and prevent the genocide. This is the thing. The Genocide Convention speaks of prevention. The obligation, member states have the obligation to prevent from the moment they know that genocide might be committed. So, the January 2024, and then stop and then punish. And nothing of this is still happening. Why? Because far too many states are denying that a genocide is happening and are profiting from it. Some people are dying, others are becoming rich or just being complicit with genocide. Voilà.
And what are other obligations of states under such circumstances of the process of genocide? One of the obligations, and you spoke about it on earlier events, is, for instance, not to export weapons to the state that is obviously committing a genocide. And you were quite vocal about it yesterday, since we're sitting and talking now in Belgrade, in Serbia. Yesterday you said, during your media engagements, actually referring to a country that is not, that is exporting weapons to Israel in spite of its obligation, according to international law, not to do so under these circumstances. Actually, this is something that was openly and publicly said by the President of the Republic, in which this space is now. And also in the meantime, now just before the event started, we saw the statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Serbia, accusing you of interfering into domestic businesses of Serbia. And I want to, I would just
another one.
And I would like to give you a chance to respond to these accusations.
I will not respond to these accusations. I will say what I said yesterday, and it's, again, I want to be challenged on the substance because I've not spoken of something that is an internal business. I mean, it would be if, let's say, the ammunitions sent by your countries were not used to slaughter children in the part of the world that I am mandated to document the violations, the violations taking place in. So, If Serbia was sending ammunition to another country, probably I would understand the sensitivities and the fact that someone is resenting my statements. But as a human rights, as an international law expert, I have to say it's not correct to say that you are free to send weapons to whomever you want, not under international law. Then you can say, I don't, there are two things that cannot stay in the same sentence. It's the fact that you are sending weapons to a country, to a state which is accused before the International Court of Justice of genocide, that puts an obligation upon you not to transfer weapons, not to aid and assist in any possible way. All the more because International Court of Justice has declared that the occupation is illegal. And until and unless Israel dismantled the occupation, withdrawing the troops, dismantling the colonies, and allowing the Palestinians to return, including by paying reparation, member states cannot engage with it. Otherwise, they are supporting the illegality of the occupation. So even taking the genocide, putting the genocide aside, it would be problematic for any country to transfer weapons to a state that maintains an unlawful occupation through its military system. And so it's likely to use those ammunitions against the occupied people. You see the point. So international law doesn't sit well with this. So what I said is that this country, like my own country and the other countries which are transferring, selling or buying weapons, selling to or buying weapons from Israel, are violating international law, including a 2004 deliberation of the International Court of Justice, which in the genocide proceedings instituted by Nicaragua versus Germany, reminded member states of their obligations not to transfer weapons to a state which is committing violations of international humanitarian law. So even if, again, we take genocide aside, the International Court of Justice has already said that member states cannot send weapons. So this might be an internal matter too, but from all sense and purposes, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a problem that concerns the international community, under the auspices of which I conduct my mandate and I speak. But of course, the reason why I'm telling you this is because this genocide is not going to be stopped by the current governments. Can we be honest about that? I mean, I always tell myself that had I been born in 100 years ago, I would have not been silent. And this is the proof that what I say is true. Had I been born 100 years ago, had I seen what our ancestors were doing to the Jewish people and others, I would have not been silent. And this is why I cannot be silent today while another genocide is committed. And it's committed with the complicity of the very international community that has promised never again.
In spite of pressures and in spite of the fact that many states are run by people who are not willing to interfere too much on the side of those who suffer in Palestine, there is a huge international wave of mobilizations for Palestine. And these people, these activists, are often faced with state violence, police violence, and brutality. How do you comment, and we spoke about it a little bit yesterday as well, even in the, let's say, in the second part of the 20th century, we had many wars against which the international mobilization was active. This time, in your home country, in Italy, we witnessed mass demonstrations, even organized by trade unions, and it was really impressive. The images from Italy went all over the world, including Serbia. what is your I mean, how do you see this? Is this an important element of the encouragement? And I know that you are getting encouragements on a daily basis from people who share your actually who support not only you but the cause. Is that how important is this international, transnational mobilization for Palestinian people?
Okay, let's be very honest. I mean, I know that I'm pretty active to be I mean, in the UN bureaucracy, I'm quite atypical. However, it's not because, frankly, I enjoy going around the world trying to awaken people's conscience instead of enjoying my beautiful family. It's that I feel the urge of this time. I feel the horror of this time. I see people dying, people being slaughtered. I mean, as we speak, when you will hear what I have to say to the Human Rights Council in next week, when I will lend my voice to the torture survivors who continue to endure the practices that I've been documenting, because it's not that I can use the past tense, you will understand. So I've been asked by the Human Rights Council to monitor, to document and report on the violations committed by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, and to engage in activities that might help this mandate, which eventually aim to advance the protection of human rights. I mean, it's not a cause for me. It's really a UN commitment, and naive as it might be, I really believe that we need multilateralism. We need to be protected by this agreement that member states, on the basis of reciprocity, accept to limit the use of force in order and think twice before waging a war. This is the multilateralism that is being broken. But this is a multilateralism that has also revealed finally, not like exposed the limitations it had. The fact that this has never been an equal system. It's been for 8 years an unequal system, because when the Security Council is not made of equal members, but there are 5 who can use their veto power. Who are you in 2026 to exercise the veto power? So this is an aberration. It's an anomaly in a system that calls itself democratic. But again, we are not going to change that. I mean, that system is not going to change by itself, because those who have privilege rarely turn into good Samaritans and give that privilege away. It requires always a shock, some cultural shock or some revolution to push that border I was referring to below a bit forward. And I think that this moment has the potential to provoke that revolution that make us more human. Like, look, I mean, we are who we are better than in the past because there have been people who have fought the system, who have spoken truth to power. Otherwise, the slave trade would have not been. I mean, I'm not saying that it was abolished because all of a sudden, and the entire world was white, world was horrified. No, but there were people that made it very, very costly, pushing for the abolition of the slave trade, and they did the same for the abolition of slavery, and then for the abolition of racial segregation. This is, as I was saying before, every right that is codified as a human right is not the legacy of a gift that we have received from states, is the recognition of the sacrifice of hundreds, thousands, and millions who have fought and died in order to correct the injustices, no? And today we are at the point where we are called, we are being tested. It's clear that Gaza has unveiled the reality. We live in a world where double standards are not only committed here and there. I mean, this is the institutionalization of double standard. Today you have a German official saying that a given country cannot invoke international law because who are you, Germany, to say that a country cannot invoke international law? And again, I mean, I have no sympathy. I have no sympathy for a regime who has killed thousands or tens of thousands of people, like in between December and January, the Iranian regime. But at the same time, excuse me, this is not a cause for aggression. So there are dictatorships with which the Western countries are fine with, and others that don't. And it happens that those who stand against Israel are those who are punished the most. This is the reality. It has happened to Iraq, it has happened to Libya, it has happened to Syria. So this is why I'm saying we live in a very difficult moment, which has the potential to provoke a change. But the change needs us, needs people, conscientious people realizing what's the problem. That the reason why the genocide has not been stopped is because, as I said, our governments are helping it. How come, despite the pressure, how come that the UK, Germany, France, and Italy have been among those who have suddenly repressed fundamental freedoms like freedom of expression and freedom of association the most? Because people taking the street were asking for the end of a genocide, for concrete measures. And this is the thing. This is a system. It's a system that connects centers of powers to Israel. Israel could have not been committing these crimes alone. So a government, I'm talking of my own country, that despite the huge protest, the strikes and everything, instead of dealing with the request coming from the masses, from the millions of Italians who have taken the street in solidarity with the Palestinian people, passes a law that criminalizes freedom of expression, because basically it says that it conflates critique of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism. So what I'm saying, if the law is passed, the law that the parliament is considering is passed, I will have committed a crime. So, and again, it's more work for us. It's more work for us because we will have to challenge this law and bring it to court, and the court will consider it unconstitutional. But you see how much effort it takes. So what does it mean? That, guys, we need to take care of politics. We need to this is not something that can be done by procurement. We need to check on the people we elect in general and look at us. European Union, we are still outside, so I cannot even blame you for that. But as Europe, look at the leaders we have. You have millions of Europeans who protest against the genocide, and we keep on through our leaders on celebrating and recognizing the genocide there. So I think it's critical that we understand how strategically we can win this over. And I think that, first of all, we need to inform ourselves better about Palestine. And it's not difficult. Today, it's much easier. Israel is understood as an apartheid state. 5 years ago, it would have been impossible. Now it's better understood, better documented as a genocide. Look at what Israelis themselves have to say. Please invite Israeli activists here. Invite those who have written a report which is called Our Genocide, and ask someone in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to read it, please. You don't want to talk to the special rapporteur? Fine. Talk to the Israelis. And so we need to unite. We need to have one conscience. We need to understand the world we want. For me, it's quite easy, and it's not about being from the left parties and right parties. Doesn't matter. Every decent people, from the right to the left, should be against the slaughter of kids. Can we agree that killing kids or making kids intentionally orphans and homeless is wrong? And if it's wrong, we need to stand against Israel. for what it does today. I'm not calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. Absolutely not. I'm calling for Israel to behave according to international law. I think it's possible. Am I the only one who imagines that Israel can behave other than as an apartheid state? But we cannot tolerate that member states defend an apartheid state, not in 2026. So there are concrete actions that can be taken. Citizens can boycott, must boycott products that are connected to the occupation, and must put pressure on the businesses that are involved in the economy of the occupation that I've documented. But the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanction movement, it's the largest Palestine-led movement worldwide, and it's really helping map the companies, and also look at where you keep your savings. Don't say that you don't have savings. I mean, even small savings. I mean, those small savings are used to be invested by our banks. Make sure that they are not invested. This is when people start venting that they have no savings. It's okay, let's keep it for later. But for those of you who in these countries who have savings, let's make sure that they are not invested in war-related activities. And the reason why I say that this is not done for Palestine is for us. It's for all of us, because trust me, it's evident that whatever is produced and it's happening, whatever is happening to Palestine will not stay in Palestine. The weapons, the containment technologies, the unconventional weapons that are developed and used to annihilate today the Palestinians might be used one day against you or against people in this country, especially the refugees and asylum seekers communities, who will be the first victims of these containment strategies that have been tested in Palestine. And of course, there are so many other things that can be done, but we can talk about that as we go.
Now you mentioned businesses, which is something that you extensively write about in your report on the economy of genocide, where you list the companies that in this way or another are supporting the genocide, and you are actually urging for them to be accountable as well. But you also mentioned that we should look at our leaders, we should try to keep them accountable, etc. On the other hand, many authors nowadays write about this so-called global war regime. So if we can talk a little bit about the present moment in which the picture doesn't look that bright, not only for Palestinians, but for many peoples and nations and countries around the world, regardless of whether we are talking about Venezuela or Iran or Lebanon or Palestine, and we're just wondering who's going to be next. It seems that Cuba could be next. Under such circumstances, how do you find strength? Do you see any people among leadership of certain countries? First to my mind is the Prime Minister Sanchez in Spain, but also let's say the progressive line of the Democratic Party in the United States, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, or the new mayor of New York, or Bernie Sanders, of course. Do you see this possibility of new political figures coming to power in different countries and becoming leaders of the change you were talking about?
Certainly there are European countries like Spain and Slovenia that have really behaved, and I mean, Slovenia was, I think, the first country in Europe that, or among the first country in Europe who announced. Much respect for the Slovenian people. And but also the authorities. I mean, I was received by the president, the prime minister, a number of ministers, and they're amazing. They're really responsive. So you see, I mean, greatness, I told them greatness doesn't come with size. So it's, power doesn't come with size, in fact. But I don't, these are also governments that can say what they say. Surely they have principled leaders. Having someone decent in power is a good start. I understand that sometimes, I'm talking of my country, sometimes it's difficult because we have ministers who say, you have international law. Yeah, up to a certain point, who cares about international law? This is the concept. So it's disgraceful to have leaders who speak this way, because it means that they don't even understand the constitution that the country has. However, these leaders in Slovenia and in Spain can say what they say also because they have a strong population behind, who's been really for 2 years not only taking the streets but taking concrete actions. You have had Spanish lawyers suing companies like CAF, which is a Basque company that is helping to build the railway station, the railway in the occupied Palestinian territory for Israel, and they have extraordinarily coordinated dock workers who have committed not to be serving as ports for goods directed toward the occupation and the places of genocide, as the Italians have done. So what I'm trying to say, and the scholarship, the scholars in Spain have been phenomenal. So each part of the society has done what they had to do. No one has been silent, even when the government was not among those that denouncing the genocide. I mean, Sanchez has been amazing, but he has become increasingly vocal because he knows that he has a strong country that demands it to be principled. And this is why I say the same should happen to us. I mean, this country, I don't know if this is something that is necessarily understood here, but everyone was looking at you during the students' protest that became national protest. And it's been amazing to see over 1.5 years this sustained action, whatever the reasons have been, because then they say that I interfere with internal politics. I'm not talking about the reasons you were protesting for. I'm saying the fact of sustaining with sacrifice, helping each other, providing food, providing means to each other. This is what I mean by acting organically. Organically, as a body. A body is made of different limbs, of different organs, but it functions with one brain and one heart and moves all together, hopefully protective toward itself. And this is the test for humanity that starts in every place. Is Serbia, are the Serbian people able to stand together like the scholars, the constitutional experts, the parliamentarians, the journalists, and the activists and ordinary citizens? Are they able, also remembering that this country as well and the Serbian people themselves have experienced the torment of being dehumanized across history several times, and also in order to turn the page with the past? Because I say, really, Serbia has already been associated with genocide once. It's been already, why not to use this as an opportunity to say, no, I really stand against this? Yeah, I think that you have all the reasons not to be associated with this genocide. But if you want to do that, you need to act. You cannot just criticize your government. I mean, it's upon all of us to play a role. And this is a test that will allow us as humanity to get out of this genocide better that we have entered. Because in any case, if it doesn't happen, the world that waits for us out there will be much worse than what we have today.
I think this might be a good moment for opening the floor for the audience and for questions from the audience, even though I have difficulties to see you.
Hello, my name is Duška. I'm archaeology student at University of Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade, and my master thesis is actually connected to destruction of cultural heritage and breaking the Hague Convention in occupied Palestinian territories. So, thank you. My question for Francesca is, in your opinion, does international law currently recognize the destruction and appropriation of cultural heritage in occupied territories as a structural component of colonial domination, or is it still treated merely as isolated war crime? And can we call the destruction of cultural heritage and history also as a mean of committing a genocide?
I will kindly ask someone else to.
Okay. Good evening. You talked about how armed struggle is inevitable under colonialism, but you did call Palestinian armed resistance regrettable. So I was just wondering, you called armed resistance regrettable?
No.
I believe you said that some members of Palestinians. Okay. So I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about the equation of violence of the oppressed with violence of the oppressor. If armed struggle is codified under international law, why condemn Palestinian armed resistance?
Thank you. Can I have one more?
Hello, my name is Vladan. I'm member of Queer Zbor Beograda, which can be translated as Queer Citizen Assembly of Belgrade. At the moment, we are doing a small campaign about boycotting Eurovision because of Israel participation. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about how Israel is using culture in general to promote itself in other countries internationally, etc. How it's using its forces within academic communities, within arts, etc.
So the destruction of cultural heritage and places of historical relevance is a crime under international law. Is a crime, is clearly a crime in the is a war crime, and it can be part of genocidal conduct, in the sense it's not an act of genocide itself. In fact, the person, the scholar, the Jewish scholar who coined the term genocide had very clear in mind that genocide was sort of endemic to settler colonial regimes, because settler colonialism erases the people and so the culture, and this was not codified as part of the crime of genocide. Why? Because in 1948, 3/4 of the world were still colonized, and settler colonialism was part of it. And surely some of the signatories, France, the Great Britain and others, would have not wanted to sign off to a document that could incriminate them. So, and this is why the definition of genocide is quite narrow compared to how genocide is described in other disciplines, like by anthropologists, by historians. But I think that this is going to change. This is why I've, together with other special rapporteurs, we are investing all we can in order to provide a correct, adequate and fitting legal reading of the situation, so as to help the doctrine develop and allow legal categories to serve and to protect human beings instead of narrowing them, because judges tend to be quite conservative. In order to have progressive jurisprudence, you need to have progressive states. The reason why the Israeli occupation was declared illegal with such a firm and strong analysis is because 60 states had made submissions. So the the court was sure that that was also not just a law, but state practice. And here the genocide jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice is not very developed. There are 2 cases that has been dealt with now, and a new one with Myanmar, and the 4th one with Palestine. But so this is why I think we need to try to advance as much as possible the debate, and we need to talk about that. So I'm really glad to see researchers, young researchers and students devoting their time and their focus on this, particularly because, and this is something I say as a legal scholar, as a legal expert, we tend to, we lawyers, but this is something that even doctors do. In the pursuit of rigor, we tend to specialize ourselves on a given topic that then doesn't let us understand the rest. So you have those specialized in genocide, those specialized in economic, social, and cultural rights, who do not necessarily understand civil and political rights. And then, no, the protection of the human being. We need to have, as lawyers, a people-centered approach. Human rights are for people to enjoy. Human rights are for people to enjoy, not for academics to write books about, you know. And then, I mean, I was saying today, it's great that the protests were started by students, but shouldn't have been continued or led just by students. It should have been also supported by other parts of the people, if they were, as I understand. Let me. Here I'm getting in trouble with the government. So let me give you the example. Don't applaud, please. Let me give you the example of Italy. Where I say why academics are not taking a stand in support of the students in the encampments. So it's okay to write expensive books about human rights, but then when these young folks are trying to make sense of what you are teaching, you say, oh, I need to be neutral. So change profession, do something else. But at the same time, I also have a sort of critique for the solidarity movement, because, and I didn't condemn the armed struggle at all. And I'm surprised that this question is asked, because I've taken so much garbage for what I say about armed resistance, but I can take garbage from everywhere, including the fact that armed resistance is protected under international law, and as many other rights. I mean, there are rights that are much more protected than armed resistance and are violated. The right of self-determination is an erga omnes obligation, okay? So member states should intervene every time the right of self-determination of a people is undermined. The right to resist is the flip side of the right of self-determination. Like the right to defend itself is the flip side of sovereignty. You see what I'm saying? However, the right to resist does not justify the killing of civilians, like it or not. And if there was not such clarity in international law about the fact that civilians cannot be killed, I couldn't say what I say, that nothing that the Palestinians have done on October 7 justifies what Israel has done before and after. The thing is that, but this is the thing that is very critical, because you asked me about the equivalence. I don't do any equivalence. I mean, I've always said that an illegal act of the resistance doesn't delegitimize the resistance itself, while an illegal act of an illegal occupation keeps on piling up the list of crimes that have to be reviewed, investigated, and adjudicated before an international court or national courts. So it's clear that I'm not creating even a parallel, or I'm pushing for a false equivalence. No, But civilians are civilians and can never be touched. This is the main point. Regarding, when I was smiling when you asked the question about whether I had in mind any activities of where the state of Israel is promoting cultural appropriation in foreign countries. I mean, look at where we are. I mean, in this place, there is the, how do you call it? The falafel festival. People, do you know where the falafel comes from? It's Palestine. It cannot be, I mean, the moment you sponsor, and I'm sorry, it is what it is. The moment you take money from an event funded by the Israeli embassy, because it's called Falafel Festival, you are not only taking money from an embassy whose state is committing genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, you are also contributing to the erasure of the Palestinian people, because the Palestinian food is one of the things that is being sold by Israel as part of the colonial erasure of these people, like it or not. Again, and this is not even new. This is not even new because there are the film industry, the arts scene, and this is not just Israel. I mean, do you remember the film, the movies, Hollywood movies during the 80s, Rambo, or what was the other one? Rocky. I mean, to talk about the politicization of a movie. Everything was crafted so that you could hate the other, and it's been done also through filmography. Look at don't watch Fauda, but there are some series that are made to hate and despise the Palestinians, and it has been in the arts, it's been in filmography, it's been in the literature, it's been everywhere. But the point is, I respect arts. You want to produce and celebrate the Israeli military. Do this, but not. I mean, then let the possibility as an artist. You have the right to do that, but it's you, ordinary citizens, that have to choose whether to support it or not. This is the thing. I'm not for proposing to cancel culture. I'm just about proposing not to accept funds from organizations or from the emissaries of the State of Israel, which are clearly using their influence and their power in order to silence, including the solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Thank you. We have time for 2 or 3 more questions before we close the conversation. I see over there, someone is showing me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Francesca. My name is Sini Shai. I work for the United Nations as a business and human rights advisor. Last year, you published a report on the role of businesses in supporting the genocide. For those who are unfamiliar with your report, can you tell us just a bit about which businesses you were talking about, how we as citizens should treat those businesses and try and hold them accountable, and what the effect of your report has been near the year onwards on those businesses, whether there's been any effect in terms of their support to the genocide? Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more here.
Buonasera, dobro večer, good evening, thank you very much. My name is Giorgio Andri, and I'm an Italian living here and working for UNESCO in various countries of the world, including Palestine. By the way, UNESCO is the only UN body that fully recognizes Palestine as a member state. So thanks God, not all the international community is the same. And I have the big privilege to work there to protect the properties that are listed in the World Heritage List. It's an amazing job. And I'm teaching at the Bethlehem University Cultural Diplomacy. So I'm here to thank you on behalf of all my students that are resisting there, fixing the Nativity Church day by day, hoping that you will come to see us soon and giving the big message like in I Saw Ramallah book, because when someone is being unrooted, he's unrooted forever. Grazie mille.
we have time for one more. I can see 2 hands. I don't know. Someone else. Okay, 3 hands.
I'm nervous. Hi, Francesca. My name is Katerina. I am a co-founder of this podcast called The Peace Room. And what we deal with in our podcast is track 2 and track 3 diplomacy, as well as community and community-led and also grassroots peace building. I would like to ask you more about what's happening on the grassroots level right now. Are people collaborating? Are there initiatives in Palestine, in Israel, actually advocating? And how large is it? I mean, how are people really doing on the ground? And please come to my podcast.
Thank you very much.
I'll try to be really brief. So I've been investigating the genocide for 2 years now, and first I took really an X-ray of the military acts, that the military conduct and why it they could constitute acts of genocide, and then after 6 months, things had not stopped, and I said, okay, let me explain why it's a genocide, because Israel is planning to ethnically cleanse the land, and in the meantime, it's committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and also acts of genocide. And then I kept on wondering why this genocide doesn't stop. And a year later, 1 year later, I had produced 2 reports. One is the last one, the report looking at the conduct of state. Over 60 states have provided political support, military support, and economic financial support, ideological justification to Israel. This is why I say Gaza is a collective. What happens in Gaza is a collective crime. It bears the fingerprints of all of us through our states. However, there is something worse, and I get to the point of your question, which is Israel has maintained an economy of occupation, and this is something that this report could have been written decades ago, with the difference that this economy has been strengthened over the past 2 years plus, becoming an economy of genocide. And the thing is that while the costs of the war were rising up, where 6,000 Israeli businesses were shutting down, where part of the Israeli population was suffering attacks from Lebanon, and so with people being displaced, people from the south also being displaced. How come the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange kept on rising of 213% compared to where it was in late September 2023? And this is, if you start digging, you understand why. So Israel has, first of all, uses the private sector to displace and replace the Palestinians. And this has not been costly for the Israelis. For example, the military system, the military industry has been used to force the Palestinians at gunpoint, using violence to leave their land that have been then expropriated and protected from their return. This is the occupied Palestinian territory. And then Palestinians have been contained and surveilled. And then once they've been displaced, they have been replaced by where there were their villages, colonies were built. And this has meant using cement, building the infrastructure, the water grid, the electricity grid, roads that connect like 300 colonies that are in the West Bank alone, and they connect it to Israel. So these 400 kilometers of road cut the occupied Palestinian territory, leaving Palestinians unable to connect to this grid. And so it's really a series of an archipelago of places where they live segregated, discriminated, marginalized, and dispossessed. And again, there are companies behind it. So companies, the private sector has some standards. So it's not that there are obligations, and still they are obliged to divest or not to be associated with, not to cause and not to contribute to human rights violations. If they do, they need to face consequences. And the consequences are of three types. Either the states take action against them, not going to happen, or the citizens take legal action against them, very costly, but still it's a strategy. The other thing is putting pressure on them, divesting, using the power of your pocket. And this is why I was so determined to write that report. And you know, I've collected information about 10,000 entities, not just in the military companies, construction companies, car companies, bus production companies, surveillance systems. Most of them are Israelis, but not only. But think of Palantir, think of the big tech, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and banks, pension funds, and universities, and NGOs. So look, no one, so, and then I picked some that seem to be really well ingrained among themselves to explain the system. But it's very rich. I mean, if my report, Economy, Occupation, Economy or Genocide, was taken as a list of businesses to boycott, I would have failed, because I only showcase 48 of them. But look at the work of the BDS movement. It has a list of all the companies we should boycott, and all banks we should not keep a bank account in. So we have knowledge is power, because then it can lead us to put pressure. How has it been received? It has been received with an applause by the Human Rights Council, which surprised me. It has been received with great support by the civil society. I've been sanctioned by the United States for that, because I've been accused of being a threat to the global economy, which tells you how powerful this report was. But the point is, I have to say that to an extent I'm disappointed, because I'm taking so much risk upon myself and my family, and I'm not playing the martyr here. It's true, this job is voluntary. What am I doing it for? I mean, I'm insulted every other day. My reputation in certain corners has been ruined, because I'm just a lawyer who analyzes and writes boring reports. So I should be protected by member states, but they insult me because I put them in front of a mirror. But then what do I do that for? Because there is someone else who needs to act. And I'm surprised that with all those standing in solidarity with the Palestinians, we have not been able to put pressure even, I'm not saying Google and Amazon, because I understand how comfortable they are, although it's our responsibility to use alternative services, because they are part of the problem and not just in Palestine. But the point is that even Airbnb and Booking.com, I mean, I'm sure that in this room there are people who use Airbnb and you can Booking.com. Just one time. Okay, some of you, but I'm sure there is others who are doing. Or, I mean, the fact that Airbnb has not divested from the occupied Palestinian territory proves that I'm right. So for me, that was a low-hanging fruit, because it's not that I'm asking you not to use your email anymore, God forbids. No, just use another way. Do like your parents used to do. It's not that your parents didn't go on holiday, did they? So the thing is that we need to renounce to a little bit of our comforts, so that an entire people doesn't have to renounce to everything they have.
I think I will say this on behalf of all the people who are in this room. It's been an honor hosting you in Belgrade, Francesca. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.